you very much. Nice to be here.
About 3 years. You come here every year, at least since I've been here.
Well, that's consistent, if nothing else.
Yeah, really. You usually do a tour like every year? Literally every year? It seems that way, at least recently.
Well, we don't actually get to every town that we ever play in every year, but we do a tour or 2 tours in the States every year, and we make, I suppose, about 50% of the available places that we could play, we do go to every year. Then the ones that we don't make, we sort of catch up with next time.
Takes a lot of stamina, huh? Well, you're used to it after.
To an extent, yeah. Yes, it's not a particularly easy life, but then it's better than, digging holes in the road and filling them in again, isn't it?
That's true. That's very true. You have a new band this time around. It's not essentially the same band that you had before. You've got, I think, Martin Barr still in the band?
That's right, yes. Well, we have some new members in the group, primarily because the album, which is out at the moment, the album A, is actually, or was actually, a solo album of mine, and was made at a time when the existing group had sort of more or less parted company for a indeterminate period of time while we sort of reorganized ourselves and did various things that we all wanted to do individually. And in
other words, you're all still friends. I mean, it's not one of those, No.
I mean, the others are all busy about their own affairs at the moment, but the record company, having heard the solo album, decided that they were a little bit reluctant to release it as a solo album and thought it was better to call it a Jethro Tull album. So after much argument on the subject, I eventually agreed, and the members of the group who played on that album agreed to come out on the road as Jethro Tull, although 2 of them have never been in Jethro Tull before. But, essentially the working nucleus of the band, which is myself and Martin Barr and Dave Pegg, the bass player, are all well familiar with what Jethro Tull is supposed to be doing. So we play, well, much as we do with any new album, we feature the new album in concert. We also play, a lot of the older material as well. So it's...
the little letter that I got in, I don't know if it was from you or from the record company now that we talk about it, but, it wasn't signed Ian Anderson at the bottom. But, your name was at the bottom, and, it was talking primarily if you went to a Frank Sinatra concert or a Led Zeppelin concert or whatever it is, if you don't get some of the old material that people expected, well, then there, you'd feel that you didn't get your money's worth, I suppose.
That's right. Well, that sounds like the sort of thing I would have said, yeah. I don't go to Frank Sinatra concerts that often, but I have been to one, and I was disappointed because he didn't play.
You did go to a Frank Sinatra concert. I know, I can't say that I've been to one. I did go to an Elvis concert once, so I never was really a fan of Elvis Presley, but I did go to one of his concerts once. In terms of your own music, because you do have a style that is really essentially out there on its own. I think there's only one other band that's ever even sounded like Jethro Tull and the kind of thing that you do. And there's some people, I remember when the band first came out, Horselips, they had mentioned that this sounds a lot like Tull.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Someone else said that to me the other day. I've never actually heard Horselips, but...
Well, I'll get you a couple Horselips albums before you leave the station.
Well, do. I'd be very interested to hear them. It's, perhaps we can come to some arrangement.
If you need some...
They could be a B team, you see. We could send them out around Japan and Australia and pretending to be us and split the money.
Well, they don't have any lookalikes like you or anything.
Well, plastic surgery has advanced a long way these days.
A couple of people had asked me, especially you, when they see you in concert, you're a real animated character on stage. You're one of the most animated performers that at least I've ever seen. And I'm wondering if it's, do you do a lot of exercises or anything, or do you run, or, you're sitting here smoking cigarettes at the same rate that I do, but yet at the same time the amount of energy that you put out in the animation that you do is almost to the point of extreme,
Well, people do ask that question a lot, and the answer is that I'm able to be animated on stage only because the rest of the time when I'm not on stage, I, take it reasonably quietly and behave like a sensible human being, I think.
Very quiet. I came in here and you were almost asleep.
No, I was actually asleep, yes. I was actually asleep. I try to catch, like a half an hour sleep every day around, early in the afternoon. Makes a bit of difference, you see.
Yeah. What is it with the material that you write? Like I was going down the list of songs on your new album, and I'm thinking over some of the old stuff, you know, and so many people, you know, they write songs, they're love songs. There's always songs about love and broken hearts and things like that. And you go over JETHRO Tull albums, you know, particularly all the stuff that you've written, and you seem to write more about things that...
well, I write about the stuff that's left, you know, after everybody else has finished writing about...
You really do.
Sort of the human relationship songs. I mean, it's not that I, you know, have any disdain for writing songs that are essentially about, you know, the male-female relationship, assuming that's what you're into. But it's just that everybody else is doing that, and the vocabulary that's available to deal in terms of, you know, linguistics and semantics with that subject is a very overworked one, and I don't really enjoy merely reconstituting, you know, sort of great verbal ideas that have been put forward over and over again in the past and sort of turning them out, you know, again and again. It wouldn't interest me just to be juggling a limited number of words. So I deal with the subject material that other people tend not to sing about, and I sing about it using my own vocabulary, which is probably a little bit more extensive in terms of lyric writing than most of my contemporaries. So I think my lyrics probably do stand apart from most people's, you know, attempts to write the words to go with rock music.
I think for, you know, an example, I think for some of the folks in the audience that really haven't had a chance to really get in touch, maybe even with your new album, I was reading about the song Protect and Survive, which you said is about a pamphlet. You know,
that's right. It's about the only sort of form of acknowledgement of any civil defense program that we have in the United Kingdom. I mean, you don't have anything much better over here at the moment, but we do have a newly issued government pamphlet called Protect and Survive, which attempts to illustrate for the under fives, it would appear, judging its contents, you know, what will happen to you in the event of a nuclear war. And not only is it downright misleading, it actually contains substantial mistruths and is basically... Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's irrelevant. It does contain some basic information which, you know, might conceivably help you, but it's... as I say, it's insulting in its oversimplicity of the situation, and it isn't really what it's all about at all. So, I mean, I'm taking, if you like, the idea of the result of reading something like that and putting it into a kind of a very naive lyric, and as much as to say, well, you know, if that's what one has to believe nuclear war would be like, then it would be a rather disorienting and sort of rather mystifying experience to deal with the actual horrors that would really result. I mean, it tells you politely that you merely just wrap up your dead in a piece of cloth or material and label them conveniently for the rescue teams to dispose of.
If there are rescue teams.
Well, quite, you know, and I mean, there aren't that many people particularly good at handling dead bodies, and I doubt if most people would... I mean, it's just full of, you know, rather interesting stuff. But I do actually study the serious and as real as possible side of civil defense and, if you like, nuclear survival. And I do use some of the terms that are to be found in the serious study.
I'd like to do this. I'd like to play this song, and then let's continue on with what we're talking about, because we're off on a track that I really wanted to get into. You mind if we play this?
No, by all means. By all means.
Let people check this out. It's called Protect and Survive, and it's off the new A album on LPX, and we'll get back to the subject we were talking about, but check out the lyrics on this first. That's from the new A album, and that's by Ian Anderson. That's what we were talking about, Protect and Survive, off the new A album. We were talking while we were off the air briefly about the little problem we had here in the United States a couple of weeks ago with the multiple warhead that was in the container that said "Do not drop," that they ended up finding. I don't know how far away from the missile silo in Missouri or Arkansas or wherever it was, but kind of a strange situation. But getting back to what we were talking about, you hit on the things that other artists just don't hit on at all. You know, for instance, another song on the album about the batteries not being included. Irritating, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think everybody must get at least one Christmas present every year that involves some kind of, you know, power source, and it always proclaims on the box in small letters, you know, made in Taiwan, batteries not included. You know, I mean, it always happens actually to my children. You know, they get something and it's all the shops are closed, you know, and it's like 3 days before they open again or something, and they can't play with this toy because it's defunct, you see, and you don't happen to have the right size battery in the house anywhere, and it's a common story these days.
And then you do get the battery in it, and it doesn't work right.
Well, yes, I mean, that can happen as well, but...
Oh, jeez. What about you know, other music and things? I'm not asking you what's inspired you, you know, because you've been around in this thing for so long, you know, and I'm not asking you what you used to listen to or anything, but, you know, if you're sitting around at home, obviously, you know, you like music, that's what you do, that's your, you know, your business, at least part of what you do.
Which is why I never ever listen to it at home.
I know, you don't listen to your own material, I'm sure.
Well, I don't listen to anything, really. I mean, my wife will occasionally have the radio on, which is something I've learned to live with, but I don't listen to music recreationally at all. I never really have, and I don't think I ever will, because I enjoy playing music, and I enjoy writing music, and I do quite a lot of both. And I think there's a certain number of hours in the day that you can, you know, be receptive to musical ideas, whether they're your own or somebody else's, and to go beyond that and undertake a musical experience for the leisure time as well would be, you know, too much of a good thing. So I just find I literally just can't. I get to the point where I'm saturated and don't really want to hear any more. Right. Which is, you know, is a shame, because I'm sure there are a lot of good things around that I miss out on. You know, you mentioned the name of a group that I never even
I mentioned Horselips, you know.
So
it's a band, they're not a real
things.
big one, you know, but they've got a couple of albums out, you know, and I think they went with the, I'm trying to remember what they were saying, if it's Welsh rock and roll, I think they were describing it as, much like Jethro Tull. And I thought to myself, well, is Jethro Tull Welsh rock and roll? I mean, do all the Welsh rock and roll bands sound this way, you know? And you're not a Welsh rock and roll band, are you?
No, we're Scottish and English.
Scottish and English, you know. Anyway.
I rather think Horselips, I've got it somewhere in the back of my mind, I believe them to be Irish rather than anything else. I know I've heard the name, but just recently someone said that it sounded like us or something. Well, I mean, maybe they don't. Maybe we sound like them. I don't know.
Very true. When you first started learning playing, I read an article, it was a long, long time ago, that, you know, you didn't have any money, couldn't afford anything really except this flute. You know, it was kind of like the idealistic type story, but is that really what happened? I mean, is that the first thing that you picked up and learned?
The story was that I was the guitar player in a sort of amateur band, and
called the Blades?
Well, yes, it was. It had various names, but at the time we became Jethro Tull. We had a guitarist in the band who was a good guitarist, and there was no reason for me to be playing guitar anymore, so I sold my guitar. Well, in fact, I part-exchanged it for a couple of items in the shop, and one was a microphone, which as a singer I needed, and I looked around the shop for something else to the appropriate value of the cash balance, and on a whim, you know, took a flute home with me, which I, at some point later, actually picked up and learned to play. Around the time the band started playing, actually, so it was just, I mean, it could well, if there'd been a trumpet in the shop, I might have ended up with that, you see. There's no great mystery behind it at all. It was just something that I, on a whim, decided to have a go at.
Mostly, like, even the flute, like when you just picked it up, you just more or less picked it up, you didn't pick up a book or anything and figure out... No, I
never had a book. Consequently, my technique, especially the fingering, is actually, you know, quite incorrect.
Is it really?
And it's well, it does pose problems. I also have a little finger on my right hand is, as you see, is a slight problem. It's
a little screwed up.
It's a little screwed up, and consequently I can't really play properly anyway. I do have problem with the lower keying in the right hand. So
and nobody ever uses that part of the flute anyway.
Well, unfortunately, you have to use it rather a lot, because it's the bit you have to use when you're crossing between one octave and another. So I have to cheat a lot, you see, and play a lot of harmonics instead of real notes. And but I just taught myself. I didn't have a fingering chart. I just found out where the different noises were and picked it up. It must be a very easy instrument if I can learn it. So.
Well, I did the same thing recently. About a year and a half ago, I picked up a record player. Flute and... I started doing the same thing. Couldn't get a noise out of it for several hours.
Well, that's the hardest bit. Once you can get the noise, the rest of the fingering sort of comes to you. Really.
I mean, you find out as the higher end of the flute, you'll get the higher notes on, and as you close all the holes on the way down, it gets lower. But for instance, a lot of bands get involved with the companies that like make the flutes, and make the guitars, and and make the drums and the drum heads, and they write on the album, flutes and drum heads and all this courtesy of so and so. But
that's quite right, they do. Our band is no exception, except that we, I actually don't get anything. I mean, the flute makers would not be at all interested in me playing their flute, because the market for flutes is not the rock and roll industry. The market for flute is largely school bands, orchestras, music students, and so on, who arguably would not be.
Then.
I don't know. I don't even do that. No, the only thing I actually am involved with is a certain microphone manufacturer, and only then, because after, I think, 15 years of using a particular model of microphone, I mean, every one of which I paid for, the company concerned finally came along to me and said, will you endorse our product? And, other microphone manufacturers had approached me, and I'd said no, because I actually use this other one instead. I mean, since I endorsed it, I may as well tell you it is. It's, of course, the Shure microphone, and finally Shure people came along and said, well, since you play it anyway, why don't you endorse it? And I said, well, since I play it anyway, okay. But I would never do it just to, in order to get a free set of microphones. I mean, we use about 100 microphones on stage, and, I mean, it's a pretty big endorsement.
I would have to say so. With those, in other words, they give you the free microphones and everything.
But I did try to get from, I actually went to Yamaha and said, look, let me try out your flutes, because or the ones I do play, which are a rather poor student model, and certainly isn't a very good flute. They had never been interested in even giving me like a little percentage discount. They always made me buy it from the retailers. They would never even give me a wholesale price on it. They were really quite mean. So I went to Yamaha and said, well, let me try your flutes, and they brought down their complete range of flutes, costing anywhere from a few $100 to several $1,000, and I tried them all, and I had one or two criticisms of them, and they said, fine, well, we'd love to supply you with flutes, and I said, great, well, I'd like 6 of this model, please, and they said, sure, and then they said, that'll be $12,000, and I said, well, wait a minute, I think we're talking at cross purposes here, I think I'll stick with my student model, thank you. So I still play the same grotty old one that I started with. And,
Hoosier.
they just don't really want to do deals. But with guitars, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
I mean, our guitar player Martin, is sort of very closely involved with Paul Hamer, and they together sort of developed guitars and work very much on the design of the thing, so he's sort of very closely involved with it there, so it's appropriate that he does get a couple of guitars and not have to pay for them.
But that's expensive guitars too, they cost a lot of money.
Well, they're not as expensive as some, but they're I too play a Hamer guitar from time to time, and I certainly recommend them as a good medium price model that's built in small numbers and excellently put together, which is very rare these days in terms of mass production. It's nice to see a little company that really takes a lot of pride and care to get something right with the musician at heart, and those are the kind of people we like to support.
Some of the other things like your other interests, it's not, I don't know how diversified of a person you are, but you're into automobiles too, aren't you?
Not really, no, I don't drive.
Is it Martin that's into automobiles, or you don't drive?
No, I don't. Well, I don't possess a driving license. I drive several off-road vehicles,
Oh, I see.
Not on the road. I don't have a license to drive motor vehicles on the road.
Oh, so the four-wheel drive song here that you have on the new album is just...
Yeah, well, I use in my, work, running we have a little game conservation park, and I, involved with that. So, I have to ride around there in all kinds of weather and various four-wheel drive things, and on our sheep farm in Scotland, I have to use them. It's a tool of the trade, really, you see, when I'm not playing music, if I'm out doing the other things I do, then it's a practical thing.
So you're the British version of Ted Nugent.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've heard a bit about Ted Nugent, but I mean, I've seen this unfortunate gentleman posing with, presumably sort of copies of M16s and the like.
Oh, he's a wild man.
And silly dogs and things, which, I mean, is a bit irrelevant. I don't... It may be fun to pursue that sort of imagery, and as you see, I mean, I'm wearing a camouflage hunting jacket, but that is because I actually do, on my own, without any fuss or publicity, go out and shoot. I mean, I'm not particularly killing animals. I prefer breeding them to killing them, but I mean, I actually do that, but it's not part of my image as such. I don't broadcast that in a public sense. Yeah. I mean, I get on with it.
His is all image.
The real men in the world just don't need to prove it in such an obvious way, perhaps. Are you listening, girls? Are you listening, Ted? Well, we better have to talk about this sometime.
Probably in town. You never know. You might find him at your show. He might come up and jam with you.
Really? Always pleased to meet him. I don't believe I have.
In terms of your show, almost every time you do a tour, the band is not necessarily progressing, but you're changing your stage image. As time goes on, radio stations try to do the same thing, try to keep up with what the public ideals are and what the new thing is to do. Not necessarily the latest fad or anything, but you always have a different type of look on stage.
Well, I mean, there's an interesting analogy, but I think that whereas the radio station does have to, in a sense, follow public taste and is always very close to its public in terms of feedback as to what music they really want to hear. They listen to the requests they get, and they, make a continuing and general survey of audience preferences. We, as the musicians, don't necessarily have to do that. We change our appearance, change our presentation from time to time, not because we have the feedback as to the audience preferring us to do this or do that, but simply so that we don't get bored or stereotyped or feel stereotyped by being one thing all the time. And again, it doesn't have much to do with fashion. It's merely I was just trying to present something in a different light, and it does feel quite different. I mean, if I have to go up on stage and sing Aqualung every night, it's rather fun for me to do it from tour to tour, just wearing different clothes, because that makes me feel differently about the way I sing it, and that makes me sing it a little bit differently or perform it a bit differently, and all those little subtle changes in the way you present something, they keep giving you, just a little bit of a different sense of identity, and therefore a different viewpoint from which you will perform a given song, however many times you may have done it in the past. So it's a question of change for its own sake, really, rather than change from the point of view of obeying a set of rules that have been handed to you.
I look back, like some of your old albums, back in the rack here, some of the pictures of you and your band from, way back in the 60s,
Well, I'll tell you a funny story about that, because just last night someone raised the question of age, and I remember when we first came to America and we had an album out that was called This Was, and on the cover there were a picture of what appeared to be four very old men, with sort of wrinkled faces and beards, which were just the then members of the group, including myself, made up to look like old men. But when we arrived here, we found that a lot of people actually believed that we were a
bunch of old men,
really quite old. Perhaps not as old as the photographs, but nonetheless pretty old. And I remember then, in my regular civilian guise, as it were, sort of meeting somebody, perhaps in a radio station, who said, "How old are you?" And I said, "Will you tell me? How old do you think I am?" They said, 37, at a guess. Now, I was only, I should think, 22 at the time, or perhaps 21. And so I didn't say anything, but I just found that hugely amusing. And this age 37 really stuck in my brain. And then over the next few years, I don't know whether I started to look younger or whatever, but then people started to say, "Oh, well, yeah, I guess you're about, 24, 25 or something." They started to get it right. Last night, someone said to me, when they asked me this question, I'd asked them to guess, and that same old age came back again. They said 37. Now, I'm still not 37, but, things are really looking bad when, I was 37 when I first came here, I'm 37 again now,
Well, you look at,
what about these lost years in between?
You do look back at the old albums, and you look, the way you were made up, a bit like an old man, and as time has come along, you have looked younger. At least I think so, at least judging from the covers. Now that I'm sitting here looking at you straight,
Well, I
You
should think
really look young now.
I would have thought I looked like most people in their early 30s, you know, slightly worn, but nonetheless.
I don't think you're too worn out. Hair's a little shorter. You don't look like the wild man that sometimes you look like on, on the cover of the Passion Play album.
Yes, well, my mother-in-law is eternally grateful for that. She doesn't like to be seen with me looking like a wild man, so the slightly shorn locks are merely a humble offering to her, you see, so I can take her out to restaurants or whatever, you see.
Well,
no, I mean, it's changing times. I mean, let's face it, if you go around with, hair as long as,
how about this guy over here?
Sure, well, I mean,
David Lee Roth.
That's what it is. Well, anyway, I mean, it just does have a certain dated kind of appearance about it. I mean, I had hair a couple of years ago that was probably a good bit longer than that, but, there just comes a point where you do feel conspicuously like the archetypal rock and roller, and you're getting on and off airplanes all the time, and people are...
I was going to mention airplanes when you did
they just look at you as if, oh, there we go, there's another rock and roller, and after a while it gets to be a bit boring being just another rock and roller, and I rather find it more amusing now getting on airplanes when the stewardesses sort of come up and they keep giving you these funny looks, and they think they've seen you somewhere before.
They're not sure.
And they're not really sure, and it's only by the end of the flight they actually maybe work it out, and that's more fun, a bit of mystique there, you see.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was all too obvious, and...
Ian, I appreciate you coming in. I really
Good.
I've been trying to get an interview with you for about 5 years.
Have you really?
And it's finally come together.
There you go. I mean, I'm usually around. It's just that our schedule is so tight, and there's a question of, trying to dive in and do something when you have a moment. Anyway, it's very nice to be here, and nice of you to ask me, and hope everybody out there is, going to come along and see us tonight.
We got a sound check at 4 o'clock, and White Snake will be opening for you, and we're going to talk to them a little bit later this afternoon. And I guess I don't really even know.
Don't mention the long hair, whatever you do, because they've all got.
Oh yeah,
don't say I said that. That'll only upset them.
We'll play the tape back to them before they go on. I think the showtime is 7:30, if I'm correct. I'm guessing because I don't have it listed up here, and I'm looking through the window at Cassandra.
Well, I don't know either. They're usually 8 o'clock shows. I'd be surprised if it was a 7 o'clock. Otherwise, someone should have told me. But I would have thought 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock.
We'll figure it out before the time is over with and showtime is. But it's at the arena tonight, and it is not a sold-out show at this point.